created a republic that protected them from the oppression by the nobility. Since high office could only be held for a few months, no one could gain lasting dominance. And although this meant that the political factions struggled constantly for control, the system kept out tyrants and petty dictators. The Medici family lived for several centuries under this system without making much of a mark. They had modest origins as apothecaries and were typical middle-class citizens. Not until the late 14th century, when Giovanni de' Medici made a modest fortune in banking, did they emerge as a force to be reckoned with. Upon Giovanni's death, his son Cosimo took over the family business and quickly demonstrated his talent for it. The business prospered under his control, and the Medicis emerged as one of the preeminent banking families of Europe. But they had a rival in Florence. Despite the city's republican system, one family, the Albizzis, had managed over the years to monopolize control of the government, forging alliances that allowed them to constantly fill important offices with their own men. Cosimo didn't fight this, and in fact gave the Albizzis his tacit support. At the same time, while the Albizzis were beginning to flaunt their power, Cosimo made a point of staying in the background. Eventually, however, the Medici wealth could not be ignored, and in 1433, feeling threatened by the family, the Albizzis used their government muscle to have Cosimo arrested on charges of conspiring to overthrow the Republic. Some in the Albizzi faction wanted Cosimo executed. Others feared this would spark a civil war. In the end, they exiled him from Florence. Cosimo didn't fight the sentence. He left quietly. Sometimes he knew it is wiser to bide one's time and keep a low profile. Over the next year, the Albizzis began to stir up fears that they were setting up a dictatorship. Meanwhile, Cosimo, using his wealth to advantage, continued to exert influence on Florentine affairs, even from exile. A civil war broke out in the city, and in September of 1434, the Albizzis were toppled from power and sent into exile. Cosimo immediately returned to Florence, his position restored. But he saw that he now faced a delicate situation. If he seemed ambitious, as the Albizzis had, he would stir up opposition and envy that would ultimately threaten his business. If he stayed on the sidelines, on the other hand, he would leave an opening for another faction to rise up as the Albizzis had, and to punish the Medicis for their success. Cosimo solved the problem in two ways. He secretly used his wealth to buy influence among key citizens, and he placed his own allies, all cleverly enlisted from the middle classes, to disguise their allegiance to him, in top government positions. Those who complained of his growing political clout were taxed into submission, or their properties were bought out from under them by Cosimo's banker allies. The Republic survived in name only. Cosimo held the strings. While he worked behind the scenes to gain control, however, publicly, Cosimo presented another picture. When he walked through the streets of Florence, he dressed modestly, was attended by no more than one servant, and bowed deferentially to magistrates and elder citizens. He rode a mule instead of a horse. He never spoke out on matters of public import, even though he controlled Florence's foreign affairs for over 30 years. He gave money to charities and maintained his ties to Florence's merchant class. He financed all kinds of public buildings that fed the Florentines' pride in their city. When he built a palace for himself and his family in nearby Fiesole, he turned down the ornate designs that Brunelleschi had drawn up for him, and instead chose a modest structure designed by Michelazzo.